The Brazilian government has declared a state of emergency in 34 municipalities, 26 states and the federal district after over 40,000 new COVID-19 cases in 24 hours. Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Keith Rowley, announced that the general elections will be held on August 10th. Canada has announced the suspension of the extradition treaty with Hong Kong in response to the Chinese Parliament passing the law on safeguarding national security in the Special Administrative Region. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. The Brazilian government declared a state of emergency and public calamity in 34 municipalities, 26 states and the federal district after seeing days of increases of over 40,000 new COVID-19 cases. The National Secretariat of Civil Defence and Protection stressed that the health crisis is critical in the affected municipalities as the population living in poverty has double the likelihood of contracting the virus. The announcement comes as Brazil has surpassed 1.5 million COVID-19 cases and seen more than 63,000 deaths. Meanwhile, the National Secretariat also noted that the state of emergency in the federal district was adopted to support local authorities and secure the necessary resources to curb the spread of the virus. Despite the crisis, President Jair Bolsonaro continues to insist on a reopening of the economy and the easing of restrictions. The head of the United Nations Verification Mission in Colombia, Carlos Ruiz Massieu, presented the quarterly report on the situation in the country this Friday, highlighting concern over continued internal violence. In the framework of the peace agreements and amidst the COVID-19 health crisis, the report notes that illegal armed groups have taken advantage of the lockdown to strengthen their control and increase violence in those communities where the state presence is weak, which require infrastructure and services to guarantee residents' safety. The UN official also stressed that despite the call for a ceasefire, the assassinations of social leaders and human rights defenders, as well as former FARC guerrillas, continues. In this context, the official reported advances in the comprehensive program of guarantees for women leaders and human rights defenders.
Unfortunately, in this period, the trend of killings of former FARC guerrillas has continued, which represents a high concern. The Secretary General is concerned when we have already reached more than 200 assassinated former combatants. We are particularly concerned about those areas outside the so-called new zones of reincorporation, which extend beyond 500 municipalities. There are about 75 new areas, according to information from FARC, and there is a greater risk and vulnerability in terms of security in those areas. Also mentioned is the importance of the approval and financing of the protection schemes, and also greater advances in the comprehensive program of guarantees for women leaders and human rights defenders, especially given the situation faced by social and human rights leaders, who are also signatories to the peace accord. The report also highlights the importance of the interinstitutional support for the Prosecutor's Special Investigation Unit to advance in the judicial processing of the intellectual authors involved in those crimes, and for those institutions to also advance in effective capture of the people behind the attacks or assassinations.
The Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, announced that his office had initiated criminal proceedings against those directly implicated in the theft of Venezuela's gold reserves deposited in the Bank of England. During a press conference on Friday, the Attorney General noted that the prosecutor's office had called on the competent court to issue an arrest warrant and freeze the assets of those citizens who make up the criminal groups that awarded themselves the right to illegally represent Venezuela internationally. The Attorney General mentioned several individuals, all members of the so-called ad hoc board of directors of the Central Bank of Venezuela, the illegitimate body appointed by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó. And the Venezuelan Attorney General stressed that the theft of Venezuela's gold is part of the strategy of the United States and its allies to take control of the country's assets.
That was the excuse to create a parapet of a fictitious government called interim. All these stupid adjectives. That was the excuse that the government of the United States of America and the Donald Trump administration found, together with it, stooges in the European Union, to plunder Venezuela's resources, its wealth, its assets held abroad, and simply commit a theft from the people of Venezuela. That was the excuse. To all these criminals who acted in favor of the interest of foreign powers, who have conspired to make our people suffer amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, amidst the well-known searching for supplies given a scarcity of food, medicines, and gasoline, and who haven't reached themselves by attacking the country, are accused of the crimes of treason against the homeland, usurpation of functions, and criminal association.
With less than 1,000 registered novel coronavirus cases and just 27 deaths, Uruguay is a notable exception in a region that has become the epicenter of the global health crisis. While its land borders with Argentina and Brazil will remain closed, the country is preparing to resume international air travel from certain countries. Uruguay currently has just 83 active cases, while its giant neighbour Brazil is the world's worst hit country after the United States. This success is especially remarkable as there never was an official lockdown imposed in the country. And we're taking a very short break now, so don't go away.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real Life, Fridays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. This Friday, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Keith Rowley, announced that the island's general elections will be held on August 10th. In a speech, Rowley told legislators that he had advised President Paula May Weeks to dissolve the Parliament at midnight this July 4th. He also informed that nomination day will be held on Friday, July 17th. In the last general election held in 2015, Rowley led the People's National Movement to victory over the People's Partnership Coalition.
As regional corporations and
on this day, July 3rd, 2020, I am to advise all my colleagues in this House that I have advised Her Excellency the President to dissolve this Parliament at midnight tonight. That being so, Madam Speaker, as per our Constitution and the arrangements of our acts, nomination day, Madam Speaker, would be Friday. Nomination would be Friday, 17th of July, and polling day would be August 10th, 2020.
After the end of the national emergency in the Dominican Republic, which is in effect for more than 100 days to prevent the spread of COVID-19, only 23 of the country's 101 major resorts reopened their doors on July 1st. According to Dominican tour operators, the region of the country with the largest opening of hotels for July will be Punta Cana Bávaro, which will end the month with 27 hotels open, while 9 more will reopen in August. As part of a gradual return to operations, the eastern region of the country will have some 50 hotels open by November. Activities will also be progressively resumed in the beach city of Puerto Plata. In a meeting of the temporary working group to combat COVID-19, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel highlighted the crucial role of scientists in the fight against the pandemic and their contribution to decision-making. The president pointed out that research has revealed the degree of aggressiveness and the characteristics of the novel coronavirus, which has sparked the collapse of health systems in several countries and facilitated the identification of appropriate actions to tackle the pandemic. Díaz-Canel stressed that once again, science confirms that we cannot afford to be overconfident, even as the country is moving towards recovery, and called to rigorously maintain measures and implement the de-escalation of restrictions gradually in order to prevent complications. And this Friday, Cuban legislators debated with their counterparts of the Latin American and Caribbean Parliament on issues of interest to the region. During the Parlatina virtual meeting, lawmakers addressed the update of the model law on firearms, ammunition and related materials, aimed at making the region more peaceful and secure for its population. Participants agreed on the need to update the model law, approved in 2008, in line with the current context in the region, in order to serve as a reference for local legislative bodies. Cuban legislators also participated in the debate of the Parlatina Committee on Citizen Security, Combat and Prevention of Drug Trafficking, Terrorism and Organised Crime. And this Friday, Santiago de Cuba is hosting the special tribute to the 40th edition of the Caribbean Festival, or Fire Festival, as it's known in Cuba. It was announced in May that the 40th edition of the festival had been postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic until July 2021. But organisers decided to host an event in recognition of the festival, including online performances and the corresponding call to participate in the July 2021 edition. The special online edition is devoted to Belize, which has already confirmed its participation in the event next year. Russia has decided to reopen its embassy in Libya, although it will be temporarily based in Tunisia, according to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The embassy's planned reopening comes amid the continued conflict between the UN-backed government of national accord and a Libyan national army based in the east of the country. Lavrov stated on Friday that a ceasefire in the Libyan conflict, proposed by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, alongside Commander Khalifa Haftar, who leads the Libyan National Army, in Cairo on June 6, was in accordance with decisions taken at an international conference in Berlin regarding the situation in the North African country. The decision to reopen the embassy was announced at the beginning of a meeting with the Speaker of Libya's Eastern Parliament, Aguilar Saleh. Greenpeace activists hung a banner demanding a future without coal power from the German Parliament building on Thursday, after the government passed a law to end the use of coal-fired power generation by 2038, which they stress is far too slow.
This coal law, which is being passed in Parliament today, is a historic mistake. It conceals climate protection, it runs counter the Paris Climate Agreement, and it gives billions to coal mine operators, who for that reason only power with very few power stations. There is no problem in moving to 100% renewable energy by 2030. This is our message to the German people today. And we are critical of what is being adopted today by the parliamentarians, a coal law that is not adapted to meet the requirements of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Portuguese authorities announced an economic package to bail out TAP Air Portugal Airlines late Thursday, including a larger stake for the Portuguese government. The airline has been hit hard by the downturn following the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Portuguese Minister of Infrastructure, Pedro Nuno Santos, noted that TAP Airlines had recorded negative capital of €580 million. The Portuguese government will now invest €55 million, increasing its stake from 50% to 72%. Meanwhile, 5% of the share capital continues to be held by airline employees. The agreement was reached with TAP's main shareholder, David Neilman, in order to secure operations. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the suspension of the extradition treaty with Hong Kong and other commercial measures this Friday in response to the Chinese Parliament passing the law on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Despite claiming to support the one country, two systems principle, the move by Canada is a clear act of political interference in China's internal affairs.
After studying the legislation and its impact, Canada will treat exports of sensitive goods to Hong Kong in the same way as those destined for mainland China. Effective immediately, Canada will not permit the export of sensitive military items to Hong Kong. We are also suspending the Canada-Hong Kong extradition treaty and updating our travel advisory for Hong Kong. Canada is a firm believer in the one country, two system framework. We will continue to support the many connections between Canada and Hong Kong while also standing up for its people. In the days and weeks to come, we're also looking at additional measures, including around immigration.
And more than 20 countries have welcomed the adoption of the law on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region by China's top legislator during the 44th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. The total number of countries who support China's adoption of Hong Kong-related law has risen to more than 70. During Wednesday and Thursday's UN sessions, the representative of Russia firmly supported China's implementation of the one country, two systems principle, saying that Hong Kong affairs are entirely China's internal affairs. North Korea, Venezuela and Cameroon also voiced firm opposition to the use of Hong Kong or Xinjiang to interfere in China's internal affairs. Meanwhile, representatives from Ethiopia, Ivory Coast and Madagascar all said that the UN Human Rights Council should follow the principles of objectivity, impartiality, depoliticization and non-selectivity in order not to politicize or adopt double standards on human rights issues. And Chinese authorities announced on Friday they will ban the live poultry trade after the Xinfadi wholesale market was identified as the source of a fresh coronavirus outbreak in Beijing.
We should strengthen the supervision of food safety in key places such as agricultural markets. Take Beijing Xinfadi market as a warning. Focus on investigating the potential safety risks of agricultural markets and deploy measures to strengthen the management of food safety risks in key places such as agricultural markets and wholesale markets. We will severely crack down on the illegal trade of wild animals, prohibit the consumption of wild animals, restrict the trade and slaughter of live poultry, encourage localities where conditions permit to promote centralized slaughtering of live poultry, and gradually abolish live poultry market trading.
In the next step, the Ministry of Commerce and other departments will further increase market support for agricultural products and improve the level of software and hardware construction. At the same time, China will promote the legislation of agricultural products market.
Thailand's main international airport unveiled rapid coronavirus tests on Friday for some overseas arrivals after a 3-month ban on foreign visitors was partially lifted this month. Thailand is allowing in some groups of foreigners after more than 5 weeks with no recorded local community transmission of the virus. Business travellers, diplomats and government guests staying for less than 14 days are considered fast-track travellers who will be swab tested for the virus on arrival at the airport to ensure they are infection-free before entry. An official of Thailand's Disease Control Department explained that the test takes around an hour and a half and costs $96. The government is considering a plan to open more international travel through arrangements with some other countries in September, although according to a spokesman for the task force on the disease. Local officials reported on Friday that armed men had killed at least 30 people in Mali in simultaneous attacks on several villages in the centre of the country. The attacks took place on Wednesday in the Bankas region, but were not immediately confirmed because of the difficulty in accessing information from the area. Officials did not immediately blame any group, but central Mali has become one of the flashpoints of the country's conflict, with regular jihadist attacks and intercommunal fighting between different ethnic groups. The attack left at least 30 dead, including women, children and the elderly, while many are missing. Hundreds of people attended the funeral service of 8 men in Guinea's capital Conakry on Thursday. Opposition figures have claimed they were murdered by security forces during a rally against President Alpha Condé.
Today, nearly 200 young people under the age of 20 were murdered at close range. That's dramatic. But the other tragedy is that there is never justice. There is not even compassion on the part of those who are supposed to protect citizens. There is total impunity for the perpetrators of these crimes, and it continues. This Alpha Condé power is killing the Guineans, thinking they will discourage the others. No. We are going to bury these people. Tomorrow again, July 8th, we are going to come out again. We are going to come out to demand democracy, to demand freedom, to demand justice for our friends who have been coldly murdered. The responsibility to return our country to the people is now the contract that will bind us to these martyrs, and we must stand firm for their souls to rest in peace, so that they didn't die in vain, so that we can honor and do justice tomorrow, because justice must be done for all those families and all those martyrs.
Prime Minister of the Ivory Coast, Amadou Gon Coulibaly, returned from France on Thursday after 2 months of absence due to medical treatment. The Prime Minister was received at the airport by Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara. Amadou stressed that he was back to take his place alongside the President to continue the task of developing the country. On May 2nd, the PM travelled to France for treatment of a heart condition. He previously had a heart transplant in 2012. Myanmar authorities have reported over 160 fatalities following a landslide at a jade mine as the search efforts continued for a second day. A heap of mining waste collapsed into a lake on Thursday and buried many workers under the mud and water. A local official from the Information Ministry reported on Friday that the death toll so far was 161, while 43 people remain hospitalised. According to the official, half of the victims are yet to be identified, and there are many migrants living in a small tent beside the mine. A ceremony to deliver financial aid for the families of the victims was set to be held on Friday, according to local authorities. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesu English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.